Welcome to the webinar. We're going to get started in just a moment. I can see some folks coming in. Why don't you tell us where you're coming in from? We'd love to have a hello and a salute from wherever in the EforAll universe you are coming from. We have one panelist and our lovely Donna here to center us. We'll get started in just a moment. No, everyone wants to be shy today. Come on, just say hi. No?
I'll even type into chat.
Hold on, I'm gonna.
I feel like they already know you. I'm gonna say hi.
Is that, hopefully I promoted John, not Devon. Let's see.
You promoted.
Yeah, I did. Good. Yeah. All right. Hey, John, how are you this morning?
Hey, good. How are you? Good to see you again.
Yeah. It's actually a little disingenuous. We were already on our orientation this morning.
There you go.
But thank you guys.
So how's it going? How's it going, Morgan?
It's going. I'm currently sitting in the void.
I see
you from another dimension. It's all white here.
I'm like, what is going on?
No,
the blue pill or the red pill?
Yeah, right. Well, last time we do have blue walls, but I'm not in a room. I'm finally back into our offices just for today. We had blue walls all over, but I couldn't find one that would be private enough for a webinar. So, all
right, we're going to get rolling, and people will join us when they join us. Welcome. I'm Deborah Gallant. I am the Executive Director of EforAll in Berkshire County. Casey, you need to at least put your light bulb down and turn your camera on long enough for him to wave. Also, for everyone to see that he shaved his head.
Just to give everybody an idea how long we've been doing this, I had hair when we started.
This is actually week 10 of our EforAll COVID coping tactics webinars, and week 10 and our final week, because we actually think there are more education programs to come, but this doing it weekly, we think we're one of the first people who jumped on it, but so is everyone else in the meantime. And I don't know about you guys, we can be busy morning, noon, and night with different webinars from different people on different subjects. Yeah. And it feels like there's a lot of noise to cut through. So today we're going to actually try to sort of get some perspective on this COVID thing and what it's going to look like after, and find some silver linings. But before I introduce our guests and we get rolling into the format, I want to invite my colleague Donna, who is the Executive Director of EforAll South Coast, to do a little centering exercise. We do these for all of our EforAll webinars, and I find them sort of brings the anxiety level down and helps us all be present and available for the interesting conversation ahead. So Donna, without further ado.
Okay, before I launch into that, I just want to congratulate you and Casey on what has been an amazing run of webinars. I think you guys have provided such value to the community on behalf of EforAll, and I know these are not easy things to put together and pull off, but you've done it with such grace and integrity in your process, and so thank you for this. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Agreed.
Okay, so let's just get centered. So everybody just have a seat if you're not sitting, or if you're driving, by the way, just keep driving and keep your eyes open. But get yourself, please, but get yourself seated comfortably and lean all the way back in your chair. And then just close your eyes, and we're just going to play with the breath a little bit. Taking a nice deep inhale through your nose and letting the breath come all the way into your body, down into the base of your torso. And once it gets there, just allowing it to empty nice and smooth and steady and slow. And you want to get to a full emptying where you feel like you just have to take that inhale again. And again, a nice deep inhale, filling your whole body with breath. And then at the top of your inhale, allowing that exhale to flow smoothly and fully. And then just one more inhale, letting your belly soften as you take the breath into your body, letting it nourish and feed every cell of your body. And on the exhale, allowing for that full and complete emptying. Keeping your eyes closed, allowing the breath to just go back to its normal rhythm. And just sitting in that luxurious space for a moment. And on your next exhale, opening your eyes and rejoining Deborah.
Thank you. Donna, were those wind chimes in the background at
They
your house? Oh, it was beautiful. That was like perfectly timed too. Excellent. Thank you, Donna. I hope you'll stay for the rest of our webinar, but thank you for starting us off. That was lovely.
You're so welcome.
So let me just start off by, I think most people who are on this call know, but in case you don't, Entrepreneurship for All is a nonprofit organization that partners with communities nationwide to help under-resourced individuals successfully start and grow a business through intensive business training, mentorship, and an extended professional support network. We are in Massachusetts, and we are also in Longmont, Colorado, which is where one of our presenters today is from. So this COVID coping tactics webinar series started 10 weeks ago with the idea that if you are in isolation, quarantined in your place, staying connected with other smart business people to stay inspired, to get some ideas, to feel like you're not alone in this is a very empowering thing. And I have actually tried to create an umbrella for today, which is sort of what have we learned from this COVID crisis and what are some of the silver linings? And I brought back two presenters. Now, we had a wonderful threesome when you guys did it a few weeks ago with Leora Rifkin from Boston, but she wasn't available today. So I am going to try to step into her shoes. I feel like having run these 10 weeks of webinars, I've actually gotten a bunch of lessons and I'm going to share them. So I get to wear two hats today, both the facilitator and I'm going to be a panelist. But let me explain to our attendees how we're going to work. I'm going to ask each of our presenters to just unmute and explain who they are, introduce themselves, and then maybe share one or two sort of burning thoughts that they're having about kind of what's going on with this COVID thing, just sort of updating us on their latest thinking. I'll ask Morgan and then John, and then I'll do the same with some thoughts that I've had. Then I have a few discussion topics, and last time you guys all got into it really great, so I'm hoping we do that again. And also in the chat box, please let us know what you're thinking, or if you hear something that you want to hear more about. This hour is really meant to be a conversation about what's going on out there and how do we cope and how do we be our best selves and our best businesses despite all of this. Or I don't know, can we use it as a launching pad to be better? Who knows? So Morgan, without further ado, Morgan Smith is from Longmont Economic Development. I'm getting it wrong.
That's pretty good.
Pretty close. All right, take it from here. You got 5 minutes.
All right. Well, and I can fill 5 minutes. I'm Morgan Smith. I'm the Vice President at Longmont Economic Development Partnership in Longmont, Colorado. We're one of EforAll's partners here at their site in Longmont. Currently, I joked earlier, sitting in the void, but actually at our hub for entrepreneurship in Longmont, the Advanced Longmont Center. We have blue walls. I couldn't find one, so it looks like I'm sitting in existential nothingness. But I mean, we help and support businesses in our community in lots of different ways. We have an economic development strategy that champions growth, prosperity, and inclusion. So we're really trying to be attuned to what's going on in our community in lots of different industry segments. So kind of the couple burning thoughts in the back of my head right now is this crisis is widely experienced but unevenly distributed. So there are industries that are fine. I mean, I'll be honest with you. There's some companies here who are growing. They're doing a great job. They've figured out that, they might be business professional services.
Like who? Who's doing well?
There's a sticker company here that was designated an essential service. They were printing stickers for the entirety of our healthcare system, the social distancing stuff, things that hospitals needed to notify people. They've been manufacturing stickers in close back to 100% of volume, if not exceeding that. There's business technology companies. There's a number of others who've either stagnated. They've gotten through it fine. They haven't had to lay off anybody. There's a number of local services, lawyers, CPAs that seem to be weathering the storm fine. So from what is in the back of my mind is that we need to be attuned to understand the industry segments that are greatly impacted by this and have been decimated. And I think Main Street retail and restaurants are obvious segments, but there might even be local care services or experiential anything right now. Event venues, breweries are really trying to get creative. We have a huge craft beer scene in Colorado, like most states, and they've gotten creative. There's a couple fun stories that we can get to in the area about how breweries have gotten creative. So I think it's interesting to see how it's broken down across different industry segment lines. And I think conversely, the other thing that I've been really interested in lately is how this will eventually shake out for commercial real estate. At the Economic Development Partnership, we are thinking a lot about how this crisis will impact especially office space, but kind of commercial real estate in general. We have seen or heard a number of stories out on the web across all different states where companies that thought they're going to expand into more space said, nah, let's put that on hold and kind of figure it out in a year's time. And then there are a number of other companies who say, this work from home thing has been so great because everybody's doing it and people are more productive. We're just going to downsize. We had 10,000 square feet. Now we'll be 5,000 square feet. And why not? And when all the companies do that at a macro level, suddenly you have huge vacancies in the commercial real estate market. And there are a number of dynamics that play into that. What that means for commercial rents, what that means for cities who are trying to fill up vacant space, and what kind of revitalization tactics are needed, how we might reconfigure previous commercial spaces that had certain, from a policy level, zoning designations into something more experiential, if we're ever allowed to see each other in person
again. Morgan, before I pass the baton to John, What is your organization doing specifically COVID related, or have you been doing to assist I loved how you said it's widespread but unevenly distributed, right?
Yeah, so we have a really collaborative model here in Longmont. We have what are called the Advanced Longmont Partners. We kind of chair that group, but it's our community foundation, our small business development center, a local accelerator program. There's the Downtown Development Authority, the local chamber of commerce, the city government. There's everybody that you want at the table is at the table. And we've been coordinating a business response since the stay-at-home orders came across in Colorado. We opened up and funded across organizations a Strongmont fund. Our campaign is Strongmont here. That's held at our community foundation, and there's public and private dollars that are funding those. Our first round of applications are being processed right now. We've put together business resource hubs. We funneled people through the SBDC. We've all just been working in concert with one another to help anyone who comes through any of our organizations find the right resources. And in our mind, that is the clear and exact definition of collective impact, that we are aligning people, organizations, and resources to implement what matters, that there's not a wrong door. And that's kind of what we've been living and breathing here as best as we can in Longmont.
That's great. I love the way that you talked about the right people are at the table. I think we all need to come to the table to find creative solutions. Thank you, Morgan. John, you want to unmute and talk a little bit about what you do with Team Reset and sort of your big picture view right now of what's going on COVID-wise?
Okay, cool. I'm John Lewis, CEO of Reset Enterprises, and Reset is a social innovation development company. And we design and apply strategies and tactics used by Silicon Valley startups, and we use it for community and economic development. Some of the areas that we focus in on is narrative marketing development. We have our own podcasting studio called Speakeasy. We also have a community education platform that we just launched and had some really cool stuff happen today on an online acceleration. And we're working with the Black Economic Council, and we're looking at how we can create a better and more empowering framework for minority-owned businesses within the Berkshires. So and doing a lot of partnering back and forth from the Berkshires to Boston, which has been also very interesting. I think for me, the lens that I'm looking at it from is interesting, because when we started, I had this super optimism about about the change that was coming. But I think what flared up was just what I saw was, like you said, Morgan, that we're all in the same ocean, but we're in different boats. And I think that, for businesses of color, that help wasn't there in the way that it should have been. And we're seeing that. And a large part of that is, I think we recognize that the landscape of entrepreneurship had changed, so the traditional methods of finding people's loans and things like that, we are finding out that most of the business owners are minority, immigrants, women, and millennials who are doing the gig economy. So how are they going to figure out how to come back? And I think as it relates to Reset, for us, it's really creating a positive narrative that allows us to have the ability to look at hope as an option and really hunker down on creativity, innovation, and what we call radical collaboration. And I think that it was really good to hear you, Morgan, talking about how all the people are really collaborating in Colorado, where you're from. I think for us, it is the other piece that I think that we're looking at is how do we create economies that are more resilient? And Reset is really looking at that from the perspective of local supply chains. We're looking at it as there's Berkshires here. So how could we have maybe marshaled better opportunities to use monies that are local currencies to help stave off the crisis or help businesses out? We're doing that with the Schumacher Center. We're also looking at community education. Deborah and I just, EforAll worked together launching a 2-line accelerator course. So finding out where problems are within crisis and creating solutions and solving problems and being creative enough to do that. We just had 20 some odd people sign up, and very excited to move that forward, which I really think is great. And then this whole idea of the ability to be able to reimagine and reset and recreate. And we're doing that with the Black Economic Council via our Idea Jam. I think about hip hop at the time when it was in the Bronx and starting the beginning of it, and if anybody knows the story around that time, the Bronx was pretty much on fire and all the buildings were burning. And out of this horrible devastation that looked like, complete tragedy, spawned the phoenix of hip hop music, which is now a multi-billion-dollar lifestyle brand across the world. So I'm looking at that, even though that we're in, if I had to add a bit of hope, I said, even though, I think coming back there's a lot of damage, and there's going to be a lot of opportunity to recreate, reimagine, and innovate, and do things that you had the opportunity that you hadn't had to do before. And that is where I find hope.
Great. That's a great start. Thank you, John, for sharing that. As the person at EforAll who's taken on these webinars, I think I have a little bit of perspective. Now, our usual thing is business accelerators and pitch contests, and we're still doing them, and we've moved them online. But what happened and this is really just about me and who I am and my background, is I saw this as a pivoting opportunity, which is why we've been doing this 10 weeks and maybe everybody else wasn't, is I think the fact that the rules are changed and no one knows what the new ones are means that there's an opportunity to invent new things and new modalities and figure out how to solve problems. And one of the things that John and I have talked at great length about, because we launched this online business accelerator, is that whatever the divide was, and the haves and the have-nots, or the people who were just getting by and paycheck to paycheck, only became more magnified here. So how can we use this pivot point as an opportunity to make things better and improve the future? I don't know what that means, but we don't have to follow the old rule book. We can figure out new things. I think it's kind of an exciting opportunity if you're brave enough to try some new stuff. I love Strongmont. To me, that's like brilliant. That's exactly what we were supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
It's a shame it took the crisis to make it happen. I want to say that one of my biggest sort of realizations in all of this, and maybe this is personal, not even business related, is that things are never going to be like they were before. I don't know about you guys, but if you watch a TV show now, I don't know if you ever think about it, you see a scene in a nightclub and you go, where are their masks? They're too close together. Our whole sensibility about how life is lived has changed. So I have a daughter who's in her early 20s trying to make decisions about where to live and graduate school. She actually took the GRE with a virtual proctor. Somebody was on a video camera watching her take her digital test. It's like, and it's not going back to the way it was before. There's gonna be a new normal. And it frustrates me when I work with business owners, because I work with them, whether in the online business accelerators, through EforAll's traditional programs, when people go, when it's like, when everything's back to normal, we'll do X, Y, and Z. I think even if we had a vaccine tomorrow, it would take a year to 18 months for everyone to have those vaccinations. And then I think we would all feel like, well, what's the next thing that they're not going to have a cure for? And will we ever shake hands again? Well, what will be the new way of greeting? Will there be big rock concerts? Will people want to breathe on each other? I don't know. But I think it behooves all of us as we move forward into the future's coming. Whatever it is, it's tomorrow. Yeah. The sun will come up tomorrow. It's here. We need to figure out new ways to be in this new world, and we can't just rely on how we've always done it before. And that is the earth moving under our feet, kind of seismic change that people don't want to think about. It's so much easier for a barber to say, I'm going to go back and run my barbershop just the way I always did. But that's not real anymore. So that, I would say, is my biggest aha of it all. And I can see Morgan and John both want to say something. Morgan,
go for it, John.
Go ahead, Morgan. I'll pass the ball to you.
Oh, okay. Well, I think what to me is so powerful is that it's an invitation to lead. And like, because the last time I said the pie was thrown out the window, like it's all gone. Like the rules don't matter anymore. You can do whatever you want, and people would be like, oh, that's COVID. You know, that's such an invitation to lead. Like a local craft store here in Longmont, it's a small retail environment. They said, you know what? We'll just do online classes and sell cloth masks. And that's how they've stayed afloat. There's a brewing company down in the Metro Denver area that said, we're going to do a CSA, but for beer. So instead of buying a little box of agricultural products, you get a community supported beer membership. You can come pick up beer from the brewery. That's how they're staying afloat. Those kinds of models just emerge from a business owner in all of their uncertainty saying, okay, let's try this. I don't know if this will work. And then suddenly it works, and they've shaped a path, and that business owner gets to show other people, hey, follow me. Hey, come this way. Even if it's not intentionally said that way, it's shaping a path in the midst of all of this uncertainty. And I think when the rules get thrown out in the way that they have for this crisis, that's such an invitation to lead. And I'm optimistic about that. And it's incredibly fearful. Like, I mean, the amount of uncertainty is hard to deal with, and it's hard to shape the path. But when we choose to, and we get to say, okay, well, let's try it, and then it succeeds. I mean, what an amazing way to create the future in real time. Those are my thoughts about that. Okay,
John?
I'll chime in because, and I'll pick it up. I think that the opportunity, and I know I'm starting this with a bad statistic, but then I really want to kind of move it to a positive thing and really, kind of move on what you were saying, Morgan. I was just reading that 100,000 businesses in New York are closed. They're not going to come back again. But if you look in the ideal of creative destructionism, that leaves 100,000 more opportunities for new ideas and new businesses. And you hate to say it like that, but we're in the process of reopening and we're in the process of recovery and reinvestment. And I think it's really incumbent upon economic development organizations and groups not only to think about resiliency, but think about innovation and double down on investing in new businesses, new ideas, and things like that. Because I think it is time for people to begin to relook at their business. You know, if I'm a restaurant and I'm going out of business, maybe I need to bankrupt it and start something new, you know, in that same space. That's the opportunity that is provided now. And I'm really encouraging local communities and local municipalities, you know, to really double down on reinvestment into new business entrepreneurship, because I think that that's also going to provide a massive amount of opportunity. And the creative juices get to flowing. I heard a lot today of how people are reimagining their business and having to pivot. And it's been absolutely brilliant to hear how they're thinking about it. And I think that's what the most encouraging part of this is.
I actually think that, you know, EforAll has seen with our accelerators that are in several of our communities. Now, they've gone virtual for the summer, and I don't know if I'm positive this, but I think our fall one will probably also be virtual, because I think that's going to give people the most peace of mind. We've had more applications. I want to say Longmont had 46 applications, and they were good. I actually read some of them over the weekend. I think people are being very thoughtful and innovative and understanding things. And I think that there's a really tough decision that people have to make. And if you were in a business that was good enough and it was doing okay, that's not probably going to make it. And actually, one of the statistics, and I wish I'd looked it up, John, like you were very efficient, is how many small businesses were literally one pay cycle away from going under, that they were just going, you know, on cash flow, and they didn't really have reserves, and they didn't have growth plans. They were just putting along. And in fact, with unemployment, how many people were living paycheck to paycheck? To me, that's eye-opening, but probably it isn't surprising to you guys who think about economic development all the time. But it's an opportunity, if you can see it that way, to say, okay, the old way isn't going to work. What's the new way? Go ahead.
I do think that some of that highlights systemic failures. Not to be too pessimistic about this, but I think if we have, I think cash flow from a business perspective is interesting to study, especially the businesses that are right hitting the margin. You know, we only have a month because we're new or we haven't managed things effectively. That's interesting. But I think the systemic failure of people living paycheck to paycheck, I think that's representative of something larger at play. And something that did surprise me a lot, well, I don't know if I was surprised, but maybe I was surprised more than I expected to be, was compared to other nations around the world, we really did fail in our response to this crisis. I personally believe so. And the reason I say that, and this was fascinating to me, Berlin, the state of Berlin, it's a federal system in Germany like we have here. So state of Colorado, state of Massachusetts, it's the state of Berlin. They offered $5,000 grants to freelancers and artists. And it was a $500 million package. And it was processed in 4 days. Direct to your bank account. You just applied. You said, I'm a freelancer. Here's my tax ID. And you got wired your 5,000 euros directly into your bank account within 4 days. And even the freelancers and artists were surprised that it worked that well. Like, just to be clear, like it was not like we trust the German government to be able to do this right. But just our priorities are reflected in where the money goes. And also the pace in which we responded to this and the methods in which we responded to this, where we relied on traditional financial institutions without much regard to what does that mean for the people we're actually seeking to serve here. Mostly entrepreneurs of color and women who don't necessarily have great relationships with traditional financial institutions. Or if they do, it's again unevenly distributed, even though the crisis is widely experienced. I think that's just representative of, we've learned a lot about our capacity, our current capacity to govern effectively, to respond to crises effectively. And it's, again, I think an invitation to improve and to do better in the future. And that requires people to step up in their communities and light the path forward, I think.
I so agree with you, Morgan. It's funny that you used it. We did, the Black Economic Council did this, a few roundtables around trickle up economics. So it's interesting that you talk about Germany and Berlin specifically, because I remember when Berlin made a conscious decision to create market housing to recruit artists. And they ended up recruiting over 25,000 artists to Berlin, which then became the skyrocket and fuel for the new Berlin that you see right now. So I find it really interesting that they were smart enough and valued creativity enough and the creative economy enough to first reinvest in them as a trickle up scenario versus the large corporations. And I think when you say America failed, I think that these are the things that they failed at, you know, these, like you said, traditional structures. You know, you're hearing Harvard getting $9 million from the COVID relief response when they have a $35 billion endowment. You hear these basketball billionaires, you know, actually getting these $250 million PP funds, while small businesses are the last on the list to try to receive something, and then they get it so screwed up because they don't even understand the demographic has changed to create the right kind of products, you know, or the diversity and inclusion issue, you know, which, you know, we deal with, or, you know, the massive amount of racism. We're still looking at, you know, people getting, so, you know, I think for us, not only do we talk about the opportunity for economic growth and reinvention and reimagining, but I also think there is a moment of reflection and how do we transform and evolve and really look at our value system as a capitalist country in America. You know what I'm saying? I mean, like, really, there's a deep, soulful search that we need to really look at, because if we don't learn from what we saw and what we experienced, then and we don't evolve and transform from that, then we're just destined to repeat the same problems. And I would hope that this crisis, I think, woke a lot of people up, but the question is what do they do? And how do they move forward in creating the change that they want to seek, you know, moving forward? I am encouraged by the fact that the unemployment piece, and hopefully this $600 a week is going to be really good, because I'm hearing a lot of folks taking that and saying, hey, I'm going to reinvent myself. I'm going to open up a business. I'm going to take time, you know, so there is some ecosystem or some pay there. I would like to see us double down more on that and really talk with our congressmen and stuff. More money for minority businesses, federal, more grants instead of loans, better institutions and frameworks that actually deal with diversity, equity, and inclusion. And we have to understand that everybody in business you can literally make $1 million from your home and your computer right now. That's literally what you can do. So it's interesting that that pivot is, I think it hypercharged that reality. And it was funny hearing that in the actual Accelerator day with Deborah, to hear people saying, yep, I got caught, I'm pivoting, here's how I'm reimagining my business. And I think that you're going to see more entrepreneurship coming, even though it's a loss. So you kind of see it as, you know, as what you call a natural filtering process, you know, and I hate to say that, but, you know, it's one of those things. But I think on the other end, we really have to look at this issue of resiliency, of having our local supply chain. I think America should really focus in on their own manufacturing, our own innovation, our own ability to be able to create. I don't think anybody has that better than us. But I think that we have to do it in a very conscious and heart-centered leadership kind of way where no one is being left behind. And I really hope that that is something that comes through and that we have to continually push through.
John, that was very well said. I want to just confirm everything that I'm hearing from both of you. I don't think that the powers that be in Washington, without even getting political, whether they're bureaucrats or elected officials, have any idea what really goes on in people's businesses. And like the PPP was so badly managed on so many levels. The SBA, like you have to be an SBA approved. People don't even know who the SBA is. They never touched that. They didn't have the record keeping that they needed. The whole thing was so badly thought out. I do think, however, that one of the unintended consequences of the $600 unemployment thing is some people are making as much, if not more, than they made employed. So I don't know if they're going back to those jobs. They get something like 39 weeks of it. I don't know if I would, if I was making just as much money. But I think that it may actually be putting them on a sturdy enough financial footing for them to maybe consider pursuing dreams that they hadn't before. And no economy has gone through anything like this before. So no one knows what the other side of this looks like, but maybe this is a positive unintended consequence, that this $600 for each employed person, in addition to their regular unemployment, gives them a little bit of breathing room.
And I do think that proves somewhat of what, a pandemic universal basic income, or even generally a universal basic income, which, I mean, there's lots of good, thoughtful, nuanced takes about how you do it and whether you support it or not. That's really not the point here. The point is, look at what it's allowing people to do. Like, yes, we're basically taking out money, printing some money, taking out a loan against the future, paying people for now. But as a result of what that has allowed people to do with this extra money, they haven't been, hopefully, there have been, I know, but at scale, there has not been mass evictions. There have not been people who have lost their entire lives. They've lost a job, but not their security of where they live. Certainly, we've seen an increase in homelessness throughout Colorado as this pandemic has happened. But some of this, the general term, I guess, safety net, I don't know even if that's applicable here, helps people bounce back. And I think this proves we have to rethink about how we do it, and how it's tied to people, how it's tied to, is it tied to employment? Is it tied to unemployment, for example? And how does that create a more resilient system, back to what John's talked about, which to me, I've always enjoyed the term supple, which if you think of Jell-O is very supple. Like, you can poke it and it just bounces back. It's just Jell-O.
Exactly.
I mean, it's just a very supple thing. And I think an economy that can do that instead of a very rigid, easy to break system, which means it isn't resilient, is indicative of a path forward for us at a macro level.
I agree. And I think that it should be a local revolution as it relates to that, or evolution. Yeah, man, I so agree with what you said, and looked at how people are really working together now, and having some of the conversations I've been a part of have been absolutely amazing. Just to hear how people are thinking about the experience of COVID, what they're learning, and how they're applying their ideas or their passion and purpose to it. And in that, I find hope. Now, do I think there's a lot of work to do? Absolutely. Again, I was reading this article and they were talking about, hey, if you want to change your seat, it's not that rich folks, the greedy folks are not going to give it to you. You have to fight for it. And it's going to have to be at the ballot box, but it also has to be a local scenario where we say criticize by creating. How can we create the solutions and stuff that we need? Which is why Reset became a B Corp, to say, okay, how can we use social economic innovations to solve problems?
But John, one of the things I would say is a lesson from COVID, because I want to get to the lessons and silver linings, because I want us to end this on a positive basis, is that local isn't as important when we're all anywhere, right? So for instance, our online business accelerator, one of our key instructors is coming from Boston. And you know what? If we were doing this thing in person, Calvin wouldn't be able to be part of it, but he can, because it doesn't matter where you are. I mean, we have Morgan, yeah, it's early, but look he's there with a smile on his face. He doesn't mind. I think that this is a way to cross some barriers that we all had in our head about where we were, and it doesn't matter anymore.
I actually agree with you. It's funny because and so you're really talking about what I like, and it's really about these real tangible ways that innovation can really impact a community, which is when we brought up this online accelerator at EforAll. Deborah and I was having this conversation before I even do it. I was like, I think this is a great opportunity. And we thought it was a great opportunity from the perspective, just like you said, Deborah, that now businesses can market their business regionally and globally. And now look at how, and they were forced to. Remember, they were just depending on the person to walk through the door, you know, and waiting, not doing a lot of advertising. But now you got to be more aggressive. But now that opens up your whole opportunity to make more money and to reach more customers in a new kind of way. The Black Economic Council in Massachusetts put together a marketplace real quick, which they should have had a marketplace maybe before. But they put together a marketplace for designers and manufacturers for mass, just to serve that market. So what will that do? That sparked the idea of a marketplace. Now, maybe we can put other products on there, you know, of Black businesses as a general marketplace. So you can sell your products, you know, locally, regionally, and nationally. And so I agree with you, Deborah, that is where the hope and the silver lining actually comes in for me as well.
And I do think a lot about, Seth Godin talks about synchronous and asynchronous. So synchronous being at the same time, sometimes in the same place, and asynchronous is if somebody's watching this at a later date. And I think education is disrupted. All kinds of education. We don't even have to talk about higher ed or K-12, but any kind of online course, any kind of training or workshops has now this opportunity. This was an invitation. It always existed because this technology was around pre-COVID, but now it's an invitation to say, how can we create new spaces for different voices in different ways? And I think from even from an embedded, you know, diversity and inclusion lens, this is a huge opportunity because now it's no longer reliant on people showing up in person. Like if we set a cultural expectation that people don't have to come to a venue at a specific time in a certain city, and now they can just be wherever they are, I mean, that opens up all kinds of possibilities, language barriers, physical or intellectual disabilities. I mean, the whole spectrum of where people come from. That this opportunity of online, anywhere in the world, digital education or digital platforms is a huge silver lining, mostly because it existed before, but now everyone has been forced to interact with it and they've seen its shortcomings. And out of those shortcomings and the problems that have emerged from all of us doing this, there'll be innovators who help solve that and help make this more amenable to use, more accessible to use, more fun to use. I think we still haven't figured out how to do intimate relationships or how we do even professional networking groups. Like we can do webinars and we can kind of talk with one another about things, but we haven't figured out how to do some of those things, and maybe we never will. Maybe that's the clear shortcoming that we will hopefully eventually get back to in person. But it is an invitation for us to look at these problems in a different lens. And just on that note, before I forget, I do feel that a lot of the technology that we've used over these past couple of months was once sold to us as a panacea, the silver bullet. As long as you use this, you could solve all your problems. And now that we have, we realize its shortcomings. And I think that's actually a really cool space to be in because we've tried it all. We said, hey, yeah, we tried the video technology. We've tried the work from home tools. We've tried all the productivity. Here's how it doesn't work. And that kind of feedback is invaluable to help make products better, to help make our businesses better. And as business owners, you may get feedback from your customers if you've converted into online shops or, I mean, this is a huge opportunity to have basically live feedback on everything you're doing digitally. If
you're open to hearing it.
If you're open to hearing it. That's a huge point, Deborah. Yeah, some days I'm not open to hear it, so I totally get it. Some people aren't.
Well, and I think, you know, I have a husband who he's working upstairs right now while I work in the downstairs, and he works in the finance world, and they're still doing presentations on PowerPoint with, you know, those slides that you have to like have a microscope to be able to read it. And it's like, they haven't figured out that the way you interact here to be effective has to be different. And I don't even know what that different looks like because I think we're still figuring it out. And John and I are both at the helm of this online business accelerator where we're trying a lecture with a 2-hour in-person digital workshop. We think it's a modality that'll work, but you have to try some different things and not just rely on, oh, we've always done it that way, so now we're going to do it that way online. And I think if we get stuck there, we're all going to be zoomed out really quickly if we're not already.
Yeah, I love this. I agree with you, Deborah. And I think having a framework for the feedback and the data and any kind of framework that you can have for rapid prototyping Because that's what you're saying, Morgan, is that, you know, Zoom on the beginning was great, but when this happened, they had to step up their game as it relates to privacy, as it relates to their capacity to be able to host a lot of people on Zoom. You know, so, you know, even in that innovation was basically crowdsourced and rapid feedback allowed them to rapidly reiterate. And I think as long as we adopt that, and we, as it related to the 2-week online, really built a data feedback program so we could get information, so people could tell us how the program is working for them, what's not working, and being very open to that. And I think that's one of the reasons why the community invested here. You know, also I saw a lot of partners step up. I was just interviewing, you know, like local government, where, you know, people think they move slow sometimes, but, you know, and are not innovative or thinkers who move forward. It takes them slow and methodically. I saw people really step up, like PERC, the Pittsfield Educational Redevelopment Corporation, and be one of the larger funders for this. So yeah, I think that it has opened up a lot of folks in ways. And you know, the other thing that gets me, I'm sorry, I got really excited. All the things that they said they couldn't do, they did. Think about it. All the things the government said they couldn't do. We can't do this amount of money. We can't suspend mortgages. We can't. Now the possibility that the cat's out of the bag. Oh, you can do it. You know, and that, I think, is where the silver lining rolls in. We actually pierced through the veil. And I love the fact that we did that.
That's great. I want to just say something about this remote working. I happen to think that I'll probably be working right from here, at least through the end of this year. And while I think it's great, I mean, I'm probably working more hours than I ever did because I lost the commute time and the coffee time and the heating up my lunch in the microwave and schmoozing time. So I'm working straight through. I wonder what your perception is, and Morgan, you brought this up a little bit when you talked about the commercial real estate market. How is this going to change sort of the dynamics of workplaces and working? Like, how do you get noticed to get a promotion if you're never in the same place as your boss? I mean, it feels like we have to develop new ways to interact as a virtual company. And what are you seeing out there?
I mean, I think it's a big challenge. I do think there are some leaders. I think Basecamp, the company, has been doing this a long time, and they have some good insights. One thing, I'll start with a concern, and then I'll move into a good thing. One thing I'm very morally concerned about are companies, especially big tech companies that lead the industry, that localize wages. And GitLab does this. Facebook said they're going to do this. Twitter might. So basically, if you're a software developer working in San Francisco, you might get paid $125,000. But if you live in Denver, you'll get paid $95,000 because of the cost of living difference. And I find that reprehensible and wrong for lots of reasons. People should be paid the same for the same work. Like, that's a very basic definition. And if the point of remote working is choice, then people should be able to choose where they live. And if you read through the Q&As and handbooks around some of these companies, they've figured out and crafted lots of good excuses as to why they need to localize wages. I'm really concerned about that because that sets lots of strange precedents around culture, around money, and around how you grow in a company. So converse that or compare that to Basecamp, which is a technology company, but also the makers of Basecamp, which is a remote work tool. And they pay anywhere in the world 90th percentile San Francisco wage. They have no employees in San Francisco, but they pay at a set level, and they just set out tiers. And they said, you know, we have a senior, we have the normal, then we have a junior, and then we have an associate level. For these 4 divisions, you know, there's technology and ops and blah, blah, blah. And you just work through those tiers. And the wages are the same. You never negotiate for your wage because you're well compensated. They have great benefits. That's a total different shift in culture. Like, that isn't really much to do with salary pay I mean, it's not. It's just a decision from leadership to say, we're going to do something like this. And I think that's the main challenge. And I'm really optimistic about that because everybody's been trying to figure that in real time. So there's going to be a lot of content generated. There's going to be handbooks and books sold and video workshops. So I think that the ideas will flow. But to me, what's crucial is that if you have a remote company or a fully virtual company, that people get to know one another in that fully virtual remote. Otherwise, you have a pandemic of loneliness, which we're already suffering from, right? But if we are a fully remote and virtual society, then we're stuck in our homes for 8 hours a day, not knowing who we even work with except our own team that we might see on a video call. Like it's again, cultural decisions about how do you build teams? How do you share information? Do you do check-ins? Are they written, which allows each person to do it in their own time and check in on others on their own time? Or do you require people to show up on a video call, which has its benefits and its drawbacks? I mean, there's lots of cultural and leadership decisions to make. And I think different companies will come to different conclusions, but the same things are at stake. It's whether people feel like they belong, whether they're safe, and to some degree, whether they're loved.
Well, and I think that your main point is that the leadership of any organization needs to actually process, what does this mean?
Yeah.
And how do I keep leading a ship that's moving the direction I want with people who are all going with me in a place where I can't, have lunch with them. It's hard.
Yeah. And it's just different. It's hard, but it's hard because it's different, I think. The physicality's been removed, which we have historically relied on.
You're right. In a different way. We relied on it in work culture when we were with people for 8 hours a day. The thing that I've been experimenting with is, wow, okay, I've been able to walk around my neighborhood more than I ever had been, just because I'm not in some office or whatever, I'm able to say, I'm gonna take this break, I'm gonna walk around the neighborhood, and it just so happens there's a lake, probably 10 blocks from here, or where I can just walk to and sit and, so I think that what happened is that, and you're right, I love this, what you're talking about, these evolutions that are gonna be taking place. Like, how do we stay connected to each other? Well, it might not be through a simple video of working with coworkers. Maybe it's now more, we can connect more to our neighborhood, which we were taken away from for 8 hours. And that by the time we have 5, we have dinner and we're too tired and we can't talk to our neighbors. The other part is, how do you create work-life balance? Because being at home now, all through the crisis, some of us been meeting through Zoom from 8 o'clock all the way to 9 o'clock at night. Well, that's not healthy. So then therefore now we have to start challenging ourselves on when to turn the phone off, when to turn the computer off, take more control, and how to be more productive and more efficient and create more time and space. I love that, like you talked about education. There's been a lot of even after school online educational programs with the rope and sessions. So there's a lot of really cool ways to do that. And I think you're talking about this whole evaluation and monitoring of the quote unquote employee. You talk about Basecamp, we use ClickUp. Okay. And, so think about different structures where you would grade people on how they're being productive, because if they get the work done, does it really matter how many hours? If they're selling, but if they're following a process that's actually efficient and how well you use that, and that is getting, the company its end result, I think that'll be very, very interesting in the future. So I'm really glad you brought that up, Morgan, because that's, as a leader, and us leaders of companies or organizations are really gonna have to begin to think about that and figure out what kind of tools, even tools of communication. We like Slack, because we can rapidly communicate and iterate. We don't have to go back with so many different emails, so it might be a combination of things, where it's Slack, where it's ClickUp, where it's a project management software, and you layer that on, which is Kanban, maybe a change management system, so you can rapidly change and reflect and iterate as you begin to move forward. And I think people are going to be using those kinds of things in combinations to continue to innovate how that works. The question is on the human connection, how do we relate to that? Is it controlling us, or are we in control of it? And making sure that we create the right balance to stay human and connected, after this crisis, and get out of crisis, and actually start really living, and I think that that's also going to be something that we really need to check in on ourselves as it relates to moving forward and what the silver lining is. You know, take that vacation that you wanted to take, or take time for yourself, take care of your health. You know, all these things are other things that you have to do now, you know, in terms of keeping your immunity up so you can fight off what could possibly be a virus that could actually kill you. So how does that even change your lifestyle?
Actually,
You know, and,
John, I want to give a page from Devons Playbook, your partner. Devon's the one who said to me, Deborah, don't schedule 1-hour meetings. Schedule 45-minute or 50-minute meetings and make yourself get up and walk out of the room and do something else. And that was actually a huge tip. That one, and you can turn your own video off on your calls so you don't have to look at yourself all day. I don't know about you, I hate looking at myself all day. All right, we only have about 5 minutes left. I want to find some other silver linings. I wonder if we can just do it popcorn style, something good that's come out of this. I want to say I've seen fantastic, unusual collaborations where people have come to the table and been willing to problem solve that maybe those calls wouldn't have been made before. John, give me a silver lining.
okay, well, mine is very personal, but really cool. My family on my dad's side, all the cousins during this COVID crisis, finally was able to get on Zoom and connect and create and socialize every other Saturday. And now we're going to have a reunion to get together next year. That's beautiful. So where we were so disconnected,
that's beautiful.
Now we were able to really connect, and that's really awesome.
All right, Morgan, give me a silver lining.
Oh, cool. I love that. Oh, I love that. I think the silver lining for me is people have been, or what I've seen is that people have been a lot more attuned to a company's community impact. And not from a social enterprise level, but when a company can tell a good story about the difference they're making in a local community or an international community from an ethical supply chain or money they're giving back, people flock to them. It's amazing. And it's only accelerated what's been going on, in my view, for the last half decade or decade of companies that are more morally driven and, you know, stakeholder, I don't like the term stakeholder capitalism, but I guess that's what people are running with now instead of shareholder capitalism. So that's been a big silver lining, is the mission driven companies have really risen above the fray as a result of this crisis.
And I'll also add to that because we're really doing business on the internet now, you know, unless you're an essential business, you haven't been open for the last 8 or 10 weeks. It's sort of evened the playing field. I mean, it gave the little guys a chance to do that innovation and pivoting and get themselves out there in a way that they're not at the handicap that they might have been. I mean, it took Ford Motor Company, 8 weeks to start making face masks and respirators, and Boyd Technologies down the street here in Lee was able to pivot in a week. So the little guy actually had a chance, I think, to really be competitive. Any other silver linings we want to share before we wrap this baby up?
Yeah, just remain nimble and agile, and believe that we have more power than what we actually believe to create the future that we seek.
Amen. Got nothing else to add to that.
Really? What else can you say after that, John?
I mean, after that, come on.
That's great. So I want to thank Morgan and John for being the final contestants on COVID coping tactics webinars, week 10, and we are done. I feel like there is light at the end of the tunnel. Not sure what's there at the end of the tunnel. It's going to be different than when we got in the tunnel, but there's something out there, and we can be optimistic about what that future looks like for all of us. And thanks so much for joining me today. Thanks to the audience. Thanks to the panelists, and stay tuned for more programs from EforAll. Thank you.
Awesome.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for having us.